Welcome to Vital Readings. I'm called Vitali Movunyi and I'm hosting today. I'm very excited to be joined by a special guest, Mr. Lambert. May you say hi to all of you?
Hello everyone, glad to be here.
We are continuing our conversation about Pastor Antoine's book. It's a book that is called Reconciliation is My Lifestyle. It's a book that we have already done a short or long video of a book review, and we are continuing to have a conversation about the contents of the book. And again, this is one of the best books that we have in our country. I have recently checked on Amazon and I found that you can get it at about $14 US. Also, you can get it from Charisma. It's where I also found it at 20,000 Rwandan francs. So, Mr. Lambert, that I am very much happy that he joined us, has written something about the book. For those who might be very familiar with it, there is what they call a foreword, but there's also what they call the praises for the book. So the praises are not technically the foreword, but they are more like a foreword, because whoever writes the praise for the book has to first read the book and then be able to write something about it. So that's one of the reasons to why we have chosen to interview him about the book. But also he's the country director of LL Ministries, which is a ministry that is into teaching, healing. They are very big at forgiveness and reconciliation. And if you look at this book, its title has both of the words. So the main title is Reconciliation is My Lifestyle. The subtitle is A Life's Lesson on Forgiving and Loving Those Who Have Hated You. He's also, he speaks a lot about reconciliation. He speaks a lot about healing. He speaks a lot about forgiveness. And I believe without a doubt that today we are very privileged that he has joined us. We'll be learning so much from him. One thing that I was almost forgetting is that he's also a mentee of Pastor Antoine. So he knows probably much better than what you and I know about him. So we'll get to know about the person that wrote the book, but also get to know about the content of the book. And I would like to ask him, to start with asking you, how did you first get to know Antoine, and how were you inspired or led to become his mentee?
Thank you very much. First of all, I'm very happy to be joining you on this show or program. And about how I met Antoine, I would say it came by accident. I had heard him preach on the radio as I was back in the village. And one day, as I was at university, I was part of GBI, Groupe Biblique Universitaire. They organized a retreat and he came to share with us. And the retreat was about leadership, and but it had a very funny title because it was Who Am I? Leading, but from knowing who you are. During the retreat, I asked him so many questions, and but because I was curious and I didn't know, he took notice. And one day, a few months later, I was back at university, and he came to give a conference at the university where everybody at university attended. And at the end of the conference, I was one of the technical guys who would help with setting up the speakers, the wires, and the microphone and so on. So I passed by as he was chatting with other people who were invited. And out of the blue, I didn't intend even to say hi to him because I thought, oh, he doesn't remember me. And as I was passing, just picking up a cable that was nearby, and picking up the microphones they were using, he called me by name and say, Lambert, how are you? Do you still love God? And that ignited something in me because number one, I didn't think he recognized me. Number two, he recognized me but also knew me by name. And number three, he knew something about me, that I loved God. And that showed me that he is a special man, and he took attention to me and noticed that I'm there, but also I love God. So that really drew me to really liking who he is and what he does. And anytime I would hear he is coming to Butare, where I was studying, I would make every effort to attend whatever seminar he would be conducting. I remember I attended several seminars that were intended for pastors, but because I wanted just to hear from him, I wanted to know everything he had to share, I ended up attending them. I would sit at the back and or pretend to help in any way, but just so that I could be there. So those are my first few interactions with him. And later on, he came back for another seminar. And that's where I got an opportunity to now chat one-on-one. Because up to that level, it was just in a conference, in the retreat we had. And then later on, when I passed him and he said hi, and do you still love God? But afterwards, I had a chance to sit with him, to ask questions about the retreat, and my relationship with him started from there. But I didn't initiate it. He noticed me, and it really drew me to him, and to really want to know and learn from him. Yeah.
So do you by any chance still remember when that happened?
The retreat might have been back in 2001 or 2002. Yeah, I would say 2001. That's when, if I go search for some of my notebooks, I may be able to find the exact time. Because I still keep those notes I took from the retreat. But him coming to the university, it might have been in the same year, but having a chance to talk to him might have been around 2002.
Wow, so that's about 22 years.
22 years.
Working with the man.
Yeah.
I only know him from his interviews and his speeches. At least until towards his retirement, I discovered a side that I didn't know before. I had read a few things from the book, and I was still doubting if the sense of humor that I'm seeing in the book is actually his sense of humor in everyday life. And when I saw his video dancing, I think it was on his birthday, but towards the retirement.
Yeah.
I realized that part even much bigger of his sense of humor.
Yeah.
One of the stories that it really caught my attention in the book is when he talks about how he once painted his father's puppy with I think chalks and something else. So he painted it black and white just to make it a zebra. So since you've been with him for all that long, are there some stories that you might know that shed more light to that side of his personality?
He's a man who is down to earth, and he's very practical, and he's also very intelligent and very wise. He can think on his feet, as they say in English, to mean he's very bright. But in terms of his sense of humor, I think the greatest sense of humor is how even in the hardest time, he could use a sense of humor just to get out of a bad situation, if I may use that. I don't know whether that story is in the book or not, but I know it because he shares it many times, how once he was told that he had dirt in his ID. And he just said, I'm sorry, I left home with a clean ID, but I have been giving it to many roadblocks. Maybe it's the soldiers that I passed by who put the dirt in there, just to diffuse the situation. And another time when they asked him, they said, oh, you have a bomb, you have a bomb in your... Yeah, that one is in the book. And he just said, no, actually I have not just a bomb, here it is. And he removed his Bible to show people. So that sense of humor is there. He's down to earth because we know him as somebody who has preached and talked about hard topics. We sometimes think that he's always that serious to handling tough situation, but he's a man who is really down to earth and who can be able to interact with the people. And to highlight that sense of humor, he listens to secular music. If you listen to him, you will hear him talking about Majid the Black, you will hear him talk about Brice Melody. And I remember once, just in that sense of humor, when I was trying to get married and things not working out, there is a song he used to remind me of. It was in Kinyarwanda that said, Abasore bariho ariko nta kashi. So he would just share that with me to say, maybe that's why you are not getting married, because you are a young man, you want to get married, but you don't have maybe enough cash, and that's why maybe some people are turning you down. But not in a way of blaming me or anything, just to diffuse a situation where I would have gone to tell him, hey, the other girl I was courting, things didn't work out, and then he would use that as a way just to diffuse the situation. So he's really down to earth, and it's always a joy to meet with him and to hear his wisdom.
Yeah, it was very amazing to read this book. Obviously expecting a lot of tough and ugly stories of war, of killings, of all that, because right from the title you see reconciliation, you see forgiveness, you see hatred. So I wouldn't expect a lot of funny stories in the book, but I think his sense of humor is way a lot that he couldn't miss mentioning some things. Like that story that I shared, when I read the story and I imagined him at a young age painting the puppy, I couldn't stop myself from laughing. Yeah, but I just like I had mentioned, this book is also about our history as Rwandans. Yeah. It's about his life story, when he was born, how he grew up, how he survived the genocide, and how he has dedicated his life to teach, to preach about forgiveness, to preach about reconciliation, to also contribute to the country from a pastoral or from a biblical standpoint, but reaching not only just the people of his parish, of the place that he was pastoring, but also the entire Rwanda. In fact, one of the chapters is called publicly political. So he explains that a lot of people confuse it with him being political. But so as we enter into the story, part of what you write in the praise of the book, that I would like you to kind of go back to, so that we also kind of dive into the story with a perspective, is that you describe in the book that you came back in Rwanda in 1997 when you were 13, and you returned with a lot of fear because of you expected some sort of retaliation from the Tutsis. But you said that the ministry of the man, of course, probably with many other resources too, you kind of you experienced healing, you experienced, you rediscovered hope and a purpose for your life. So I just wanted to ask you to kind of share with us the story of what it was like when you returned, and how did you get to discovering your purpose and starting to live a purposeful life.
Thank you very much. Yeah, the genocide happened, the genocide against the Tutsi in 1994 happened when I was turning 13. And by the time we came back in Rwanda, I was 16, 17, because it was early January 1997 that we came back to Rwanda. So being 13 during the genocide, so I knew what was happening. I knew that people are being killed. I knew who was being killed. I could hear it on the radio. I have learned a few things at school. So I wasn't like ignorant of what was happening. And because of that understanding I had then, that's actually what led me to even flee, go into exile, because I couldn't imagine that the RPF would come back, stop the genocide, and find many of their relatives have been killed, and then not take revenge. So because of what I have heard, I come from Cyangugu towards the end of the genocide in, I think, May, June, because of the French army that was controlling parts of Cyangugu and Kibuye and parts of Gikongoro. We went back to school, and I got to witness many people I knew near my high school in Kibogora that had been killed. So I couldn't imagine that people would come and find that many people slaughtered by their neighbors and not take revenge. That's how we went into exile. Actually, we left as kids, we left our parents behind just because of that fear of retaliation. So when we came back, we didn't come back because we have understood everything is okay. There was a war in Congo. We went into the forests, and after 3 months in the forest, we realized we couldn't run anywhere else except staying in the forest, hiding in there, or we could come back to Rwanda. So we came back to Rwanda because we thought if we stay in exile, we die. If we come to Rwanda, we die. Let's just go to Rwanda and die in Rwanda anyway, because we still had that mentality. If you come back, you will be killed just because of taking revenge, because of retaliation. So when I came back, it was in 1997 in January. Actually, I think by March, I was back in school. And when I went back to school, I still had that fear. Maybe something is going to happen. Maybe something is going to happen to me. Then I continued to live that life. And actually, I got saved during that period. But still, that fear, that suspicion mixed with, I would say, with shame of feeling like, oh, my people have really done something wrong. They have committed a genocide. They have killed people. I carried all of that. So it's something that really I worked with throughout my 5th year in high school, my 6th, in the last year of high school. I even joined the university with the same mentality. So part of meeting with Antoine was, here is a man who is outspoken, who speaks about him being a genocide survivor, having lost his dad at 5 years old, and yet he notices me. And because one of the challenges I had, I thought that anybody who looks at me thinks I'm a Hutu or I belong to a Hutu family. So I thought, how can he even notice somebody like me? I'm nobody. I'm even from the wrong side, if you would call it, and he knows. Then later when I opened up to him and told him my story, I thought he's going to turn away and stop relating with me. Actually, it drew him even closer to me. And the message he has been giving, he was giving then and has been giving ever since I have known him, has really helped me to go on that journey of healing, because it went beyond just what he says, but how he lives. Mm-hmm. So now, you asked about purpose. When somebody is wounded, you are limping. At least you are limping, if you can even stand. So you can't really walk into your destiny. You can't really be who God has made you to be, because it's as if the woundedness or your wounding distorts who you are, and it distorts your reality, and it distorts your view of life. And because of that, then you can't really discover your purpose, and you can't even walk in it because of that distortion that comes from woundedness. So that's why when I started on that journey of healing, I could be free to be myself. I could interact with anybody. I could just do and be who I am supposed to be. And that helped me in my calling, or even in what God has created me for. Yes, I work in healing, but I'm also a believer. I am a preacher. I share the word of God. I teach. And how would you teach in a nation like Rwanda with the same heart I had before I got on that journey of healing? So it would have been impossible. So woundedness distorts who you are. It affects your view of reality. It affects what you can pursue and what you can't pursue. It affects even how you can pursue it. Just one example. One of the things that God has been working on me was to receive even help from people I would consider shouldn't help me. Mm-hmm. One of them being Reverend Antoine, and also many other friends I have who have helped me. And one of them is a very close friend. We knew each other before I became a Christian. I became born again. And one day he came and said, I want to spend the night praying with you. And I said, no way. You are crazy. You are a genocide survivor. You know my story. How can you want to spend the night praying with you, praying with me? Not for your own prayer request, but for mine. And that almost made me to push him away. Thank God that I failed to push him away, because really God spoke to me and really set me on a good path, even during that time. So to come back to your question about purpose, when you are wounded, it's very difficult to walk in who God has made you to be. It's very difficult to even embrace what God has destined you to do. And even when you discover it, it is very difficult for you to achieve it, because you need anybody. You need the help of many people on that journey of your purpose. So that's why healing is very important when it comes to fulfilling your purpose, because actually your purpose depends on it.
Wow. So your purpose, fulfilling your purpose depends on you healing from your emotional wounds and being able to get your view of life back to the real view of life, not the distorted one that has been distorted by the emotional wounds.
Definitely, yeah. Definitely. It's like a normal wound. If you have you have an injury on your leg, and you are destined to be a footballer, we hear it every day that so and so, even though he's very good in his own team, he can't play because he's injured. So he has to take time to heal before going back into playing. So it's the same with life. So we can't just say, I will play with my injury, because you will make it worse. So it's the same with our purpose, and even with whatever we want to achieve in life. If we are limping, we can't really run. We may limp and try to walk wobbly, but we will not be able to run the race that is set before us. That's why I say, really, fulfilling your purpose, your healing depends on it.
Wow. When you mentioned about how you always thought that everybody that looked at you would sort of recognize the group that you belong to, it reminded me of the first time I met you. It must have been 2012 or 2013. Part of what was called Vision Conference. It was in Kabuga. I think there's this school at the place we call Truminagatan. And I remember you asked the question. I don't know if you still remember this story. You asked the question, before you spoke, because we were also talking about reconciliation. And before you spoke, you asked the question. You were like, "Who of you guys think?" You asked people to tell you what they thought you were. Were you a Hutu, a Tutsi, or a Twa? And so people gave different opinions of why they think of what they think of which group they think you belong to. And I remember you mentioned something like, so if some people were killing Hutus, because you were categorized in every category of the three, and you were like, if people were killing Hutus, there are people here who will be ready to kill me. And if they were killing Tutsis, there are people here who will be ready to kill me. And if they were killing Twas, there are also very many people who will be willing to kill me. And you kind of later on explained how this thing of, and I think there's a Kinyarwanda saying that says, "Wish ababi amazenaweza." Like when you go after a group because of the crime that you think they have committed, or whatever you said that they have, that you are killing them for, thinking that everybody that is in that group has committed it, the crime or has offended you in whatever way, you end up even killing those that could have helped you. And I think the story that you share with, that you just shared, of how you had always sort of avoided a group of people to help from helping you. A lot of people that are still into that much of categorizing people and sort of saying, I'm not going to befriend this one, I'm not going to befriend the other one, just because of the group that I think they belong to, leads us to lose a lot of opportunities. So part of what Antoine writes, Pastor Antoine writes on page 124, and he says, I quote, "While physical wounds are never transmitted from father to son, wounds of the heart become ingrained in the genetics of a group or a nation if they are not well treated." End of quote. And he also mentions on page 117, and he says, I quote, "Survivors of the genocide need healing, but so do the perpetrators and their families. Crime is a double-edged sword. It wounds the victim, but also the offender." End of quote. So, just like you mentioned, because I'm coming back to the other thing of categorizing people into groups, but he also says that if wounds are not well treated, they're not just transferred from a father to father, but from a group, from a family to a family, from a group to a group, and from a nation to a nation. And I know that in your ministry or in your work, you interact with people from from different groups, the so-called groups that you have, that we have, and I'm gonna put myself as part of people that have run it, because it's very common in Rwanda. So you interact with all the groups that we have identified ourselves with, and I'm asking myself, from you that interacts with these people, because there's sometimes when we get an idea and we popularize it in theory when it's not practical. Do you really see this practically among the people that you help from all those kinds of groups, because there are very, very many? Do you really see this thing of wounds being transferred from generation to generation, And if that's the case, do you apply different approaches, or do you use different ways to help people depending on their background, or it's just one method that works on everybody?
Yeah, what he describes there in terms of wounding being transmitted from one generation to the next one, and being passed on within a group or within a nation or within a community is very true. And because what happens is when people are wounded, they behave like wounded. They talk like wounded people. They, whatever they do it as wounded people. It's not like you can be wounded and you behave like a wounded on Sunday, and then on Monday you behave differently. It's something that is part of you. Especially this wounding, the inner wounding, is very something you can't just cover up. Even if you try, somehow it ends up catching up with you. So it's in reality, even science has proved that. When you learn psychology, when you learn counseling, that is also taught, what they call transgenerational trauma. So it is passed on from one generation to the other. And the way this works, it works on different levels. Number one, it works by the pain you observe that your parents are in. But also it works through what you observe that you are missing because of your background. And on top of that, it goes beyond just your parents. It goes into what you observe around. Let me give maybe some practical example. People who were born after the genocide, they grew up realizing, okay, every time there are some topics we don't talk about at home. Maybe it's about grandpa because he was killed in a tragic way with a lot of torture. Then you go to school, you hear the kids say, oh, my grandpa did this and this. And you wonder, where is my grandpa? And you are still so young, your parents struggle to explain to you why you don't have a grandpa. Because if they go to explain to you the genocide against the Tutsi at an early age, it's very difficult, and they don't even want to talk about it because it's still raw and it's still difficult for them. So, and because of that silence, you feel like it's hard, it hurts even more, because those you trusted to give you some information, they are also struggling themselves, and they can't be able to explain to you because they are dealing with a lot on their own level. And remember, also at the same time this is happening, there is so many other things that are happening in the society. Number one, the struggle for justice. It's also happening. Number two, your parents are struggling to make ends meet because it's after the genocide. People have to survive, people have to eat, people have to build the nation. So all of that combined makes people to start picking, there is something wrong here, and they don't even know how to explain it. So that's an example I can give that shows that actually this is real. On the other side, if somebody comes from a family that has participated in the genocide or has relatives that participated in the genocide, there is also that shame that they carry because they don't talk about where the uncle is. And even when they are talking about it, they are hushing, they are not openly. They are saying, oh, he's in jail. And it's like a taboo to talk about the fact that he's in jail. So that also wounds the kids who are wondering, why is he in jail? But they can't explain because they are struggling with the shame. They are struggling with even understanding, even believing that it was a genocide. So that's the struggles that are there in the families of perpetrators, but also in the families of the survivors in terms of passing it on to the next generation. So in a simple term, that's how I would explain it, but it's much, much complex than that. So, but that's where it is. Now, you asked about how do we deal with that, and is it one way that helps everybody? I would say yes and no. Yes, because in my line of work, we believe healing is possible on the cross of Jesus. So, which means, yes, the cross of Jesus is one. That's where a perpetrator can go. That's where a genocide survivor can go. That's where their family members can go and be able to find rest, be able to find healing. But it's no, because they're coming for different things. A survivor is bringing the pain and is also coming to the cross to receive power and ability to forgive. But somebody from who is a perpetrator or who is comes from the family of perpetrators, he or she is coming to the cross also to receive healing from the shame, from the guilt, from even the stigma of coming from that family. But they are also coming to also stand in the gap for what their people did, or to repent if they did it themselves. So they are coming for different things. But the answer is still on the cross of Jesus. So that's why I say it's yes, the answer is the same, but also it's different depending on the individual story. But also the other thing I would say, even within the group of perpetrators or the group of survivors, everyone has his or her own story. And one thing I love about God, he understands us in our uniqueness and in the uniqueness of what we have gone through. And he deals with us in our uniqueness. So even that's why, even though we may have two people in the same week who have almost a similar story, we will still sit down as if we are hearing the same story, their story for the first time. Not pretend, oh, we did this with the other one, so we can do that with the other one. Because everyone is unique, and in their uniqueness, God wants to meet them at the point of their needs. So that's what I can say about that.
Yeah, and talking about how each and everyone has their own story, I just remembered when I bought my copy of the book, it was at the launch of the book, and he asked us that whoever wanted him to sign the copy would have to first write a commitment to writing their parents' story or their own stories if they have been part of, if they were there during the genocide. And I haven't really started to fulfill the promise, but I have talked already with my father, and started writing something down. And I think doing that is combating, or it's getting rid of something that he mentions. I'm going to read in a short while, of when people think that if we just sit down and wait, we don't have to go into these stories because you go into them and you get hurt. So it's better not to go into them at all. So on page 23, he writes and he says that, I quote, "People often claim that time heals all wounds, and that anger and bitterness will die off with the years. When kept inside, anger does not disappear with time. It turns into bitterness and subtly distorts your whole outlook on life and your perception of other people." End of the quote. And he also writes in your praise for the book you wrote and said, "The life and the ministry of the man whose book you are holding not only brought healing to my life, but also gave me hope, joy, and a vision for the future. But so before I go into the connection between the vision and healing, I would like to go back into this idea that many people have, many Rwandans have, of thinking that if I don't touch my story, if I don't think about it, if I don't go back into these memories that give me such hard time, I'm doing much better, and with time, things will heal off. So from what you are saying, it sounds like that's not true. It sounds like that's not correct. And from also what you write, it sounds like that's not correct. How does that work? How does going back to hurt myself by memories of things that I wish had not happened, how does that really bring healing?
Maybe two things I would say about that. One is a Rwandan saying which says that before you can be healed of any sickness, you have to actually vent about it. Ujya gukira indwara arayirata. And from there, I can say this, the next thing is about when you are sick in a normal way, you can't be suffering from maybe malaria, and when you get to the doctor and you don't talk how you are feeling, the doctor will not know how to really treat you. So I haven't seen anybody who say, no, I have malaria, but I'm going to not talk about it, ignore that I'm shivering, ignore that I'm in pain, and hope that one day malaria will disappear by itself. It doesn't work that way. It needs to be treated with some medication to be able to be healed. So it's the same with this wounding that we are talking about, because you ignore it, you push it aside. I understand why would people feel that way, that you have to push it aside. It's because it's painful, it's ugly, it's not pleasant. So then the tendency as human being, not just as Rwandese, but also in many other communities that I have interacted with, the tendency we have is to say, because it's so painful, let me ignore it. Let me push it aside and hope that as time moves on, I will forget about it. Unfortunately, it doesn't go anywhere. It's like having a rotten egg in your house. Until you can find it, until you can get rid of it, your house will continue to smell. So ignoring the smell will not take away the smell. So that's why we also need to remember that time does not heal. Actually, my little understanding is that time makes unhealed wounds worse, because it's like any physical wound. The longer you take to deal with it, the more infected it becomes. And the more infected it becomes, the harder it gets to be healed. So it's the same with the inner wounds, because the longer we take to deal with them, then it really affects. I would use an analogy of a pumpkin. In Kinyarwanda, we have a saying that a pumpkin that is wounded at a young age, the woundedness grows inwardly. Igihaza gikomeretse kikiri icyana, intimba yacyo ikura ijya imbere. That's what they say. So you may look outside and say, oh, this pumpkin looks good, but when it's time to slice it and cook it, that's when you realize actually it has been wounded, but it has been left without being attended to for too long. So time does not heal. What heals is actually looking and facing the pain you have faced, and you seek help. And for those who believe on the cross of Jesus, there is a place to be healed. Yeah.
There's a lot of stories in the book. And he also shares how he found his healing when he reads the story of Jesus Christ and goes through the pain, and he's like kind of watching what is happening. And he gets a point when he says, no, Jesus, you cannot forgive those people. So I'm coming back to that story also, to many other stories that are there that we may not be able to cover, to ask this question as we come to the end of our conversation. There's something that he writes about young people, of his worries about them, that I would like to quote, and then let you give us what do you think about that, and what you have for these generations, especially the young generation of my. So I'm going to be selfish here and say, what do you say to my generation? But if you have a word or two for other generations too, you can do it. But the quote that I'm reading, he's actually worried about my generation. So this is what he says on page 13, and I quote: "I'm now worried about our younger generation. Many have seen their parents massacred. Some have even seen their fathers killing their mothers. Almost all our younger adults in their late 20s and 30s have seen or heard somebody being killed. Some have even been encouraged to take part in the killing. And I wonder, will they all heal from those memories?" So Pastor Antoine writes this after explaining that he has been able to exercise his demons, he's been able to find healing, he's been able to walk the tough journey of healing, and he has found healing. He has committed himself to finding reconciliation. But he worries about this generation. Those that are in their late 20s, and I'm already in my early 30s. And he says that he wonders if they are going to be able to find healing, if they are going to be able to reconcile, and if this nation is so precious that it has come from so much of bitterness and hatred and very many bad things, if the hands that they are giving it to are safe hands. So what do you think? Do you share his worries? Do you think there is a lot of hope? What's your message as we conclude our conversation to all these generations, but especially to my generation?
Thank you very much. I think there is so much truth in what he says, because when you look at, even not just as young as you are, but also as young as I am, I'm in my early 40s, which means I'm among those generation, the generation that was younger, very young. We were in our teens, we were starting to be teens, we were younger, and so on. So there are so many people who witnessed a lot of things. But what did we do? How much help did we get? And on different, in different perspective, not just survivors or those who are related to the perpetrators, but also those who came from outside, who returned in Rwanda. They have their own challenges. Being told you are coming to a land that flows with honey and milk, only to find it flowing with blood, that is shock in itself. And but also, I remember, I'm just remembering a story of how they have been in even a conflict, not open conflict, but misunderstanding between survivors and those who came from outside. Because at the end of the genocide, some were rejoicing to have come back to their land, but others are trying to find the dead bodies of their relatives. And then it feels like we are not in the same category. So that's pain that people still carry. And so I understand his worry, and I share with his concern. And that's actually what led me to even do what I do, because I realize I'm still young. I need to participate. I need to give my contribution.
If I may cut you short.
Yeah.
Just remember, there's this other group that we always forget. Recently I was reading a book that is called I Was Born a Hutsi. It's a book by a man called Mudachumura, and he's from the mixed background. His mother is a Tutsi, his father was a Hutu, so he grew up from a family of genocide survivors, But when he grew up and became of the age, he learned that his father was a Hutu, having hated Hutus because they killed his family. Now he realizes that my father was a Hutu, so he tries to find out if it is his father that killed his family members. That's when he learns for the first time that not all Hutus killed Tutsis, and he really goes through a lot of struggle. And I'm sure that you share. I mean, you have probably interacted with people from that kind of background too. So just what I was trying to say, that as we talk about these groups, that one is also a special group that is that has struggled. You read the book
when you look at the situation of Rwanda, it's by God's grace that we are still a nation, because you can't exhaust the categories we have, because we have also those who were born of rape during the genocide. We have those who don't even know which category they belong to. We have even those who are a mixture with other tribes or other countries, and they wonder how it fits. And one thing, just your comment reminded me of, we need also to remember that all these categories are man-made. And that's why they confuse us. Because if you were to go back, there is nothing that proves that anybody is a Hutu or is a Tutsi or is even a Twa. Because we have the same culture, same language, we live together. And even those who were categorized that way for many years, they have their relatives who were categorized otherwise, in other way. So, but because this was the basis of the loss of over 1 million people, we can't just say that didn't happen. No, it's there, because people were killed in terms of those. So I was just responding to what you were mentioning. You can't exhaust the categories. If any Rwandan, anybody related to Rwanda has his or her own wounding in one way or another. And that's why we all need healing, so that we are able to really have a future Rwanda. So I was saying earlier that looking at the concern he has, sharing in his concern, actually it's what led me to say, no, I'm not going to sit and be a spectator. I'm going to give my contribution. I'm still young. I know, at that time when I started, I was not married, but I knew I will be married, I will have children, and I wondered, which kind of nation do I want to leave to them as a legacy? And that's what pushed me. So there is worry, but there is also hope. And the hope is even the fact that we are having this kind of a conversation. This is not my initiative, it's your own initiative. Many people are talking about this because we want to be healed, we want to be restored, we want to see a difference happening in our generation, but also in the next generations. So there is hope. The journey is still long, but there is hope. But his worries are grounded or have a reason to be worried. And I wish more people would be worried to take action, like maybe the way it might have led you to also say, let's have this conversation. And the more people can be open and be able to talk, and the more people will be able to heal. And as more people are healed, then the more stable we can hope that our future will be.
Yeah, so I would like to thank you so very much for your time and for joining us at Vital Readings. I hope we will do more books, because we look forward to doing more books, not just Antoine's books, even though we have already so far selected the 3 books of which that we're going to do. But we're going to do many other authors' books, and I'm looking forward to your book too, that we may do a book review of it.
I have a skeleton.
That's great.
But
that's
I need God's grace and time to be able to finish it.
Thank you so very much.
Thank you too for having me.